So back in the day, like I said earlier, back in the day, I used to be a sprinter. It was my sport of choice, right? Loved the 100, 200. I couldn't stand the 400 to be honest with you. So I don't, that's another that's another thing. But I was a 100, 200 runner, outdoors, indoors. I ran the 60, and I just loved sprinting. I love track and field, and it was a big part of my life growing up, like a huge part. Um, Learned a lot of stuff over the course of time, whatever. But I was a pretty decent sprinter. I would run in like the school leagues, and then I would run in like the extra leagues, like traveling teams and things like that. And I got to build up a pretty decent resume, what have you. But there was always or also a pathway for me to sprint and train to get to the Olympic trials and get to the Olympics as a sprinter. Never made it there because and I'll tell you this story real quick. I was sprinting in college. And mind you, I went to a D3 school. I didn't go to a D1 school or anything like that, and so I didn't, have a scholarship for running. So I wasn't like superior to anyone else or anything like that. But I was fast in my own right, and I just heard something in the back of my mind basically said like, yeah, you're fast in your own right basically means you were slow. I wasn't slow, I promise. I promise you I wasn't slow. But listen, I was quick. I was pretty quick. And I'll never forget, like, it was indoor championships, and I, ran first heat of the indoor championships and while in college. And I noticed, like, I ran the first heat, it was fine. But then when I was stretching to get warmed up for my the finals, right? I think I was number one seed in the finals for the indoor championships, and I felt like this little twinge in my leg, and it's at that point in time is kind of do or die mode. So I had to get my weight up, and I had to get ready to go, but it did not feel right. So get to the starting line, the gun goes off. I'm like, bang! I'm gone. I'm out. Like I'm out, burning, and speaking of a gun going off, it felt like something shot me in the back of my leg, of my left hamstring. It was the most excruciating thing, and I mean, it was just pain, burning, and it popped just like I pulled my hamstring, basically, tore it, pretty significant damage, to a point where I was coming up on the finish line, and I finished the race, but I didn't finish the race, like, running and winning and everything like that. I actually rolled across the finish line, and I was just writhing in pain, screaming, like literally screaming at the top of my lungs in pain. I don't think I felt pain like that. Up to that point, I've never felt pain like that. It was brutal. It was brutal, and then got carried to the back, and it immediately started swelling up, and it was huge. It started turning purple. And my dad was with me at that time, and it's not trying to get all like emotional and everything like that, but it was I knew it was bad just because I saw his face and he had tears in his eyes. And this dude, like, I don't think I've ever seen him like actually like cry. He had tears in his eyes off of that, and so I knew it was pretty bad. And that was literally the last competitive race that I raced in my track career. It pretty much ended my track career. And so there were no Olympic trials. There was no going on, even running further in college. There was no traveling team stuff. All that stuff pretty much stopped. And then, I get the x-rays done and everything like that, and everybody get the doctors to check out the leg, and there was so much damage that I would needed surgery. Let's put it that way. And I don't want to gross anybody out on all the minute details, but I needed surgery. And I'll never forget, this doctor basically presented me the option. He was just like, look, if you want to competitively sprint again, you're going to need this surgery. And if not, then you he kind of just gave me this look, kind of like he was looking at his board, and he kind of looked up at me a little bit, and he was just like, if you don't get the surgery, basically, you'll never be able to competitively sprint again. And I'm like, and me at that time, I'm just like, never? Like, what are the chances? Really? Never? People come back from hamstring injuries. They do. But this injury was very, very, very high up. And there were some tendon damage. It was significant. So I could heal on my own, and so on and so forth. But it was just, I wouldn't be able to competitively sprint again. That's what I was told. So at the time, I didn't want surgery. I didn't want anybody. I was afraid of surgery, actually. So that marked the end of my sprinting career. And then I went through 3, 4. I forgot how many months. I was on crutches for a little bit, and then I went through months of rehab and trying to build it up. And then at that point, I couldn't do anything more. So I stopped a whole bunch of different things. I stopped a lot of activity, just because I couldn't really do much anymore. And it was funny because, well, it's not funny, right? It is what it is. But with me stopping activity, I'll lose muscle, right? Because my metabolism is on steroids. And it burns, and I'm always burning. So I got really, 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 really skinny, and super, super light. So I was maybe I'm like 5'6", 5'7", or whatever. I was maybe 115 pounds. Right. So that's, bruh. So, after going through all the rehab and all that fun stuff, and I stopped, working out, eventually I got to a point where I found, weightlifting, resistance training. And that kind of set me up for, building up this hamstring again, but then also building them both up so that I don't have any imbalances. So then I went through about 10 years of doing that. All right. So it was a long, long road. And to get to a point where maybe I won't competitively sprint again, and that's okay. I don't need to competitively sprint. I don't need that, especially not now. I'm 40. Although it's a thought. They have masters leagues, but whatever. My main point is I'm sprinting. I'll sprint because it is so good for you. So what I propose here is sprinting for any and every age. So there's no point where you can be too old to sprint. And I know that sounds weird, right? But I'm also the guy who says that you can't be too old to lift weights either, right? So resistance training for everyone, sprinting for everyone. It's just how you do it that really determines your success in it or your injury in it, right? So let's jump into it a little bit, right? So sprinting is an anaerobic exercise, right? So remember, aerobic is where you have the oxygen present. So aerobic would be more like cardio. Anaerobic is more like resistance training, weightlifting, where oxygen is not present, right? So sprinting is actually an anaerobic exercise. Even though you think I'm running, so that's cardio, it's not. And that's why, I'm jumping ahead of myself, but that's why you have these sprinters who look so jacked because it's so good for you. It's so good for you. So basically it's an anaerobic exercise that uses quick bursts of speed at max intensity. So sprinting lines up more with HIIT than it does with jogging, right? Or, HIIT than with cardio. Okay. Even though you could say HIIT is a form of cardio, sprinting is, and you'll see what I'm talking about, because you're not doing an hour-long sprint workout. You're doing maybe a 20-minute one, right? But it's at max intensity, and then you call it, right? So You do it for, well, there's a few compelling reasons to do it. You do it for heart health, because it's really good for your heart, right? You do it for weight loss, and we're going to dig into that one quite a bit. Sprinting is better for weight loss than just pure jogging. Hang with me on that one, right? You also do it for mental health, and you also do it for your bones and joints. And he was like, well, wait, why do you highlight mental health by itself? So there are some really good mental benefits to sprinting, and actually shows up in studies, right? So sprinting as an exercise modality has been studied, and there are quite a few studies out there concerning it. So if you just, look at a few of them, you could build up a pretty decent picture of what sprinting could do for you. All right. So I'm just going to present some of my findings through these studies. Okay. So, let's break it down a little bit more, right? So I gave you the general categories. So let's break it down a little bit more. So the most obvious improvement that you can have through sprinting is the improvement on your cardiovascular health. So the improvement of your heart, the improvement of your blood vessels and arteries, things like that, right? So it actually strengthens your heart and it improves circulation, right? And you can imagine like the pathway there. It's just like your heart's pumping, like, because again, you're working at max intensity. So your heart is going boom, 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 going pretty fast. It's sending all this blood, all this oxygen, everything that nutrients, all that stuff to your muscles faster. So it's forcing your body to do this at an elevated rate, right? This intense exercise also trains your body to get, and this is what I was just saying, it trains your body to get oxygen to the muscles and organs, basically everywhere oxygen goes, thinking about it. But like it trains your body to get oxygen to where it needs to get to more efficiently and more effectively, right? So this is another thing that you can do to improve your blood flow or improve your circulation. Because apparently I get caught up with saying blood flow, and somebody somewhere in some algorithm doesn't like the word blood. So, and of course, and I'm going to keep saying it. Anyway, sprinting improves circulation in the same way that I was talking about in the circulation episode, and the supplementation, the nutrition, like building the new vessels or adding new vessels and growing new vessels to get, oxygen to wherever it needs to get to more efficiently, but it gets everything else to where it needs to get to more efficiently as well. Okay. Well, so let's think short term first for a second, right? Short term, it also rapidly increases your heart rate and and that's kind of how it makes your muscles stronger. So, working out works out your heart, right? So, sprinting works out your heart in a different way, right? Because it's forcing it to pump stronger, faster, right? So, it also improves structure and function of your blood vessels. And this is what I'm telling you about when you add new vessels, and so you can get oxygen to more places and all that fun stuff. And it improves the actual structure of it. So like the makings of your blood vessels. So if you recall in the previous episodes, 2 episodes ago when I was talking about the blood flow, I was saying that there are certain things that can actually break down the walls of your blood vessels, right? So what antioxidants do is basically make sure that damage doesn't occur, and it helps repair the blood vessels themselves. Sprinting, what it does, it also improves the function because it gets everything faster to where it needs to be, to your blood vessels. So it also improves the structure and function of your blood vessels. So it kind of is also helping in reversing the damaging effects that happen over time to your blood vessels. Right. So it's great for your muscles, too. And, it trains your muscles to use oxygen more effectively and more efficiently. Right. And the thing about sprinting is there's 2 muscle types or muscle fiber types. Right. Sprinting largely uses those type 2 muscles, type 2 muscle fibers, those fast twitch muscle fibers. Those also those are the muscles that are more prone to hypertrophy or growth than the slower twitch fiber type 1 muscle fibers, right? Because it mainly engages those type 2 fast twitch muscle fibers. They're those, and let's break that down a little bit more, right? Those muscle fibers are more responsible for the explosive movement. So like, wow, right? You're just like that twitchiness, those fast twitches and those explosive power movements. Your type 2 muscle fibers are responsible for that. Your type 1 fibers are responsible more so for endurance, right? So they're the longer term stuff. So that's why jogging, you're mostly using your type 1 muscle fibers. Sprinting, you're mostly using your type 2 muscle fibers. And so, sprinting in general not only can increase your maximum speed and your peak power, but it also can recruit and build even more muscle on top of that, which is, so basically it says it has a multiplicative effect here, right? And again, all of this stuff is through studies, that are readily available to the public, right? So sprinting is the best. I just want to break it and say sprinting is the best. I'm going to say it probably 5 more times before I'm done here. But sprinting is the best. But sprinting is also very, very effective for fat loss. And that's, so if, I hate to harp on this whole injectable thing, but it's just like, and maybe this is just too broad of a statement to make, but I'm gonna make it anyway, right? You do whatever you want with it, but I wonder, of all of the people who are running to these injectables for cosmetic reasons, not medical reasons, right? All the people who are running to it for cosmetic reasons, I wonder how many of them actually sprinted in general, or did a sprint program, or tried anything like that. I mean, first of all, before we even get to that, I wonder how many of them actually work out. And then going beyond that, I wonder how many of them do any resistance training. And then going beyond that, I wonder how many of them actually do any sprinting or have done any form of sprinting at all, like any distance. I don't even care if it's 10 meters. I wonder how many of them have done that. And I'm pretty sure that number is very slim. But if they knew all the benefits of sprinting that have already been proven and they're tried and true, but you know what? Maybe it's a mentality thing too. And that's kind of just sitting in the back of my mind now. Maybe it's more of a mentality thing for these folks. I just don't like to group them all into this group and say that, well, they don't want to work. Because I understand that everybody has different situations. I just wonder in general how many of these people who are doing it for cosmetic reasons have actually tried sprinting. That's it, right? But and I say that because sprinting is so good for fat loss. It is really tremendous. Again, think about all the sprinters. Think about every sprinter that you've seen in life. Most of them, if not all of them, look straight jacked. I mean, like just jacked. Like, there's no other way to put it. They jacked. So, listen, sprinting, this is kind of one pathway. There are multiple pathways to muscle growth here, by way of sprinting. But one of the ways is sprinting triggers the release of testosterone. I'm talking about testosterone again, I know. But listen, it triggers the release of testosterone and human growth hormone. You hear that? So combining, so that says that there's a pathway in which you combine a small mini sprint program to complement your resistance training program, and you can actually put on some decent lean muscle without putting on as much fat. So this obviously leads to elevated muscle protein synthesis, right? And we go over that cycle. You want to spike muscle protein synthesis as many times as you possibly can throughout the day, because it's net protein growth that you're really worried about, not just muscle protein synthesis, but as soon as you're building up muscle, you're also breaking down muscle. So you want to, as a whole, grow more muscle than you're breaking down, so that you're net protein positive, or net positive protein, net protein positive. I don't know how to say that, but I think you get the point, right? So it also improves muscle coordination because sprinting requires your entire body. It requires your entire body to move in a particular way, in a particular rhythm. And so it improves your coordination by quite a bit, right? So you'll ultimately, with a sprint workout or with a sprint program, you'll learn to move better in general, right? It also is good practice for getting your muscles to work well together and work well together efficiently, okay? And it stimulates the production of satellite cells, which, I talked a little bit about these satellite cells in a previous episode when I was talking about inflammation, right? But part of the inflammatory process is releasing these cells that repair and help grow tissues, right? So sprinting stimulates the production of satellite cells, which are vital for muscle growth and repair, okay? Sprinting is also a great stress reliever, right? It's just what it'll say when you put, and this is where kind of the mental side comes in a little bit. When you're just really thinking about it, if you haven't so there's a couple parts to this really, right? One, you're going to be sweating, right? And sweating helps you release cortisol. Cortisol is the stress hormone, right? So especially if you have like a high octane, high stress job and you're looking for something to do, it could actually benefit you to, first do something calming to bring it down a little bit, and then go and do something that's a little bit more elevated by sprinting, so that gets you sweat out the cortisol. But it's also a good stress relief by itself, right? It reduces the overall levels of stress hormone, whether sweat is present or not. And it boosts your mood by, your body releases those endorphins. There's a thought process with that, right? So the mental side is really you're pushing your limits. And whenever you do something that pushes your limits, there's a way you want to do it, right? So like the way I'm talking about it is you want to go right up to that limit point, Don't cross over it because then you'll get hurt, but go right up to that limit point and then relax. And then what you find is that you go to that limit point one time, then relax, then you go up to that limit point again, but then the limit point is just a little bit further, so you're able to do more. And so it's like what you used to think is your limit or is your max, you'll be able to kind of shatter through that. There is mental currency there. Maybe I want to put it that way. So it's just like there's just value in that. There's a lot of value in that, in the idea and the process of shattering your limits, right? I don't know. Like, if you know me, I'm a Dragon Ball nerd, right? Like, I love Dragon Ball, Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball GT was a little weird. It was wonky, but I still watched it, right? And then Dragon Ball Super, that was kind of my jam, right? Saw all the movies, everything like that. Now, there was highs and lows and everything like that, but the number one thing that always, that always just interested me, and look, real talk, if you know, right? Like, is Goku always shattered his limits. And it's just like, and believe it or not, Goku's not my favorite character. Vegeta actually is. Because here you have Vegeta sitting here looking at this dude always shattering his limits. And he does the same thing in his own way, right? He might be cocky, he might be arrogant, he might be all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, this dude stayed with the grind and he stayed consistent enough to continue to shatter his limits no matter what Goku was doing. So Vegeta always will be my dude. That's my dude, right? Plus he's funny. But it's that whole idea. It's really why I watched that anime in the first place, right? Like, I watched that because it seems like it's always about just that next step further, that you got to buckle down, and it's like when everything seems like it's over, you got to find that next gear. You got to find that next level. So for me, taking it back to the sprinting, The sprinting allows me to shatter my limits. And there are limits, right? There are limits. And some of them aren't real. And I will wholly 100% admit to you some of the limits that I placed on myself, some of the limits that are there, I placed on myself, right? Especially when it comes to sprinting. So here's a situation in which I should never sprint again, but I'm sprinting and I'm loving it. I feel free again, and the mental benefits, the mental boost, the motivation I get from just getting on a starting line is beyond belief for me, right? So it's like there are those limits where, like, maybe one day I will enter in a master's race or something like that. I don't know, but the process of just being able to sprint again after what happened to me, immediately that just calls up some Dragon Ball Super stuff going on here, where it's just like, yo, I'm breaking through these limits. I'm about to go blue. Again, if you know, you know. So it's just what sprinting is, it's so good mentally, and I can imagine. And again, this is why I say it's for all ages. There's a way to do it for all ages, right? So you're not going to sprint the same way. Like if you're 60 years old, you're not going to sprint the same way a 20-year-old would, right? But you could do something at 60 years old still. And the thing about it is like, the older you get, the more outside pressures will tell you that you shouldn't do it. And then so there's a limit right there that needs to be shattered and broken through. Right. So for me, that keeps me going. That'll keep me going, doing a whole bunch of different workouts just to make sure my sprinting is better. Right. So there are a lot of mental benefits to starting or taking on a sprint program. Now, the question comes up after explaining all of this stuff and what it's good for is like, how do you implement it into your routine? Okay. In fact, believe it or not, the way you implement a sprinting workout or a sprinting program into your overall, fitness, setup isn't by sprinting at all. Like, I don't want any of you sprinting first thing. And now let's run with this, especially so like the older you get, the less I want you to start off sprinting. And that's basically making sure that you don't injure yourself up front. Because one of the main problems that a lot of people tend to have, and this is why they stay away from sprinting, is that they don't properly prepare their body for sprinting, right? Because sprinting is a skill. Running is a skill. And I can tell you how many people I see I'm going out for a jog, and it doesn't happen as much now because it's cold. And no. So, but go to the park. I take the boys to the park and everything. And I see people running around. I can't tell you how many people have terrible running form. Like it's just, whoa. It's a skill. It's a skill to learn. It's a skill to perfect. It's a skill to practice, right? So that you can avoid knee injuries. So you can avoid injuries to your shin splints or tibialis inflammation or whatever. Right? Ankle injuries, hip injuries. Oh, like I have bad knees, so much impact. Like it shouldn't be that way. It really shouldn't be that way at all. It's like it really actually shouldn't even be that much impact if you're running properly. But all that aside, sprinting is in and of itself is a skill to be learned. So you got to break it down into smaller components to learn the skill of sprinting before you actually sprint. This is not one of those things you just want to jump in and do because you think you know how to do it. And there are people take the professional sprinters. I went to this one sprint camp. They had this whole setup where they would actually film you sprint, and they would fine tune your sprint form when you're landing, where you're landing, how high your knees are going up, and your arm pump. Like it would analyze the entirety of your sprint, all the phases of it, and it was. I mean, for a data nerd, that was great. It was amazing. But what that says is it's a skill that you have to learn and perfect each portion of in order to be good at it, and in order to avoid injury, right? So what I suggested starting off with is building up strength. So it's going to sound crazy, but again, surprise, surprise, start off with a resistance training program that's focused on strength. And, focus on your legs, focus on your hamstrings, your quads, focus on your calves, focus on your tibialis. That's severely underworked in probably almost everybody. Nobody does tib raises anymore, right? Focus on your glutes, right? Focus on your core, the pretty abs and all the other layers under that, right? Focus on all that stuff, and focus on building up the strength and building up that mind-muscle connection to each of those individual muscles so that they can work in unison. I also suggest doing so once you start off with a strength training program, you can still stick with it. But once you start off with a strength training program, then I want you to move into sprint drills. Still not sprinting yet. Okay. And these are basically a bunch of leaps, hops, and bounds, skips, A skip, B skip, things like that. Right. So start to move into sprint like activity. Okay. And that's going to be key, because then that'll really start to get your body prepared. So essentially, start off with the resistance training program, keep with the resistance training. Now sprinkle in, like, during your what would be like your cardio days, throw in days where you're doing sprint drills, okay? And do that for a while too. So when you're doing these sprint drills, you want to do sprint drills for each portion of the sprint, right? So you have the start, then you have the acceleration phase, where you're picking up that speed. Then you have the drive phase, which is like from like the middle, and then you have the like the deceleration phase. And really, the deceleration phase is just trying to limit how much you slow down, right? Because you're inevitably, once you hit peak, you have to slow down. That's just the way it goes. You have to hit, as soon as you hit that peak, you're slowing down from that point on. You want to limit how much you slow down as you go along. Right? So you want to do drills in each of those sections. So work on start drills, work on acceleration drills, work on work on drive skills, work on deceleration skills or drills. And that will complete your sprint essentially. Okay? So my personal favorite sprint drills, they include a lot of, like I said, A skips and B skips. So a lot of skips. I like the skips because that gets a rhythm down and it keeps me bouncy on my toes, light on my feet, right? And butt kicks. And so butt kicks are like a kind of like maybe a more personal choice for me because I busted my hamstring. One thing that I started doing to get ready for my sprint, one of the sprint drills that I did a lot of, and I wore this drill out, were the butt kicks, because it really forced me to contract the hamstring and start to feel it again. Now, I didn't do it without pain. The rehab process stunk, but once I was able to actually kind of do a little jog with the hamstring, that's when I started doing things, sprint drills and butt kicks, and started building it up again and all that fun stuff, right? So butt kicks are definitely my faves. There's other drills that you could do for sure. But also, I also like wall drills. So I'm pressing up against the wall and I'm driving my knee up. That's working on your drive phase as well, right? So I'm doing high knees, but up against the wall, bringing that knee up, bringing that knee up, bringing that knee up, bringing that knee up, right? Those drills I like quite a bit. And then there's other drills that you could do, right? So like you want to like resisted sprint training. So like you could do these drills with resistance. You could do like stride, so it's not full sprinting, but it's kind of just like opening up your stride, kind of over accentuating it a little bit, just to kind of, I usually do that as a warm up for the sprint workouts, right? But you could do heavy sled pushes and pulls. That definitely increases your sprint speed, and it definitely increases like your cadence, so to speak, right? It improves your cadence. And you can also move into plyometrics, box jumps, different jumps, leaps, bounds, single leg, double leg, whatever, side to side, front and back. all of those things. So you could add those in. So that's where you would start. You wouldn't jump right into sprinting. You would start off resistance training, and then you would strength training in particular. So we're not going for the hypertrophy exactly here, right? So it's not bodybuilding. We're looking to build up strength. So we're looking for increasing maxes here, right? After that, go into sprint drills. A lot of skips, a lot of butt kicks, a lot of hops, leaps, and bounds, okay? So there's some wall drills as well, right? And then finally, you want to move into, backtrack. And another thing that you could do, and I just thought about this, another thing you do is, this is a good place to put isometric exercises as well. And especially if you did like isometric exercises that were more on a ballistic side, ballistic in nature, because it's even less likely that you're going to injure yourself there, because it's not as much movement, like you're just contracting the muscle, bang, 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 bang. But that also helps in sprint speed and coordination as well. So, like getting back to it, so the actual, by the time you get through the resistance and by the time you get through the drills, now your body is prepared to start off with these sprints, right? And when you start off with the sprints, you got to start off slow, right? So here's my suggestion, right? And this is just a sample program, right, that you could go through to once you get to the sprinting part of this, right? So I would suggest doing 2 sprint workouts a week, okay? And each workout should consist of, like, of course, a warm up to get the blood pumping. And like, you want to build up a little bit of a sweat for your warm up here. Nothing too dramatic. You don't want to wear yourself out, but you want to be warm, right? You want to be ready, right? And then a brief, maybe 2-minute or so mobility routine. And you just want to move through a lot of mobility movements quickly, okay? And then you get into the sprint drills. So the drills should never go away. You should do the drills from that point of where you're only doing drills all the way until you're actually doing full-on sprint workouts. Then that will be your, like, kind of like your warm-up, right? So get some sprint drills so that you can get your body ready for the sprinting. And then when you get to the actual sprinting, right, you want to separate it out like this, right? So for the first 2 weeks, your sprinting should be like maybe 50 meters. So do, 50-meter sprints at 75% intensity. So that's not all out, not yet, right? So that's a stride. So you're just opening up your stride a little bit, right? 50 meters, right? Do that maybe 5 times with maybe 1 to 2 minutes rest in between each. So think about it. If you do a 50-meter like stride sprint, you can take it down, then walk back. And then by the time you walk back and get back to the starting line, you should go again, okay? And work it out that way. And then do that for maybe, like I said, do that for 2 weeks, then move on. And for the next couple weeks or so, you do 40 meters at 80%. And the same thing, do 5 of those, right? And again, for each workout, like for the 50-meter sprint at 75% intensity, and you're doing that 5 times with 2 minutes rest in between, that's the entirety of the workout, okay? We don't want to overload it. We don't want to overdo it. We want to be cautious in our approach to it. That's why you're going to take a little bit more time warming up. And then you want to get through these 5 sprints and move on and call it a day, right? So sprint workout shouldn't be that long. Remember, I said a sprint workout should be around maybe 20 minutes, 25 minutes, half hour. So if you include, let's just say you do a 10 to 15 minute warm up, well, you have a 20 minute to 15 minute sprint workout. That's sufficient. You don't need anything more than that. Okay. So then, like I said, then you move on to the 40 meters at 80% times 5 with a 1 to 2 minute rest in between each, right? And this is the way you do this. So the way you achieve like the 80%, this is a fast start. So you're starting as if you're going all out, boom. And then you're kind of coasting for the rest of the 40 meters, right? So this is working on your start. A quick start, max intensity at the start, and then you ease into the 40 meters, okay? And then 2 weeks after that, you go to 30 meters. 30 meters at 85 to 95% intensity. Do that 5 times, 1 to 2 minutes rest in between each. Now, this is a fast start, and a fast middle. So it's a fast start and a fast acceleration phase. And then during the drive phase, that's when you start to stride until the end. Okay. Now, you do that for another couple weeks. And then what you do to close it out, now we're looking at 20 meters at 100% intensity. So you're doing that 5 times, 2 minutes rest in between each one. And you're basically going all out for the entirety of the 20 meters. Max intensity all the way through. And that's just an example, right? That's just an example of so it's like, what did I say? So it's 2, 4, 6, 8 weeks. That's just an example of an 8-week sprint program that you could do. And there's a number of ways you can mix and match it up and go about it, right? So that's an example of how you structure it. That's a sample program But sprinting, go out there and try. And I don't care if you're 65 or 25, sprint. It's so good for your heart. It's so good for your cardiovascular system as a whole. It is almost unrivaled. And I don't get exactly why. No, I get it, because there's this stigma against it, right? Because, if you don't do it properly, you are going to get injured, right? But that's with anything. That's with anything at all. Like anything that you do, especially what we're talking about resistance training. If you don't do it right, you're going to get injured, right? If you don't, if you don't drive right, you're going to get injured, right? Like, name it. If you don't do it right, of course you're going to get injured. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that action in and of itself has a higher chance of injury. Sprinting, when done right, doesn't necessarily have a higher chance of injury. No more than any other exercise, at least. But the kicker is most people jump into it right off the bat. And then they, pop a hamstring or something like that. Obviously, my suggestion is to ease into it, build up the strength, start the drills, and then go into sprinting and go from there. And again, that's for any age. Any age. That program that I just gave to you, that's for any age, okay? So, go out there and get some sprinting done. Let me know how that goes for you, right? Give me 2 weeks. 2 weeks, and let's see how you feel. All right, let's keep it pushing. So if you like this segment, here's another one for you. Click over here. And if you want the entire podcast, go this way. Click on that one right there. And once again, I appreciate you. All right, you take it easy.